So here we are approaching summer vacation, and I think it's safe to say that air travel again, post-pandemic levels, they're back. They are back. We're at pre-pandemic levels, rather. So we're seeing more people fly than ever before. I just read a story saying summer passenger volumes are now at those pre-pandemic levels. So that's all off the board. All that stuff where people weren't flying, that's all over with now. The problem is, while airports have been getting better, and while people have been losing their bags everywhere, most people, there is a problem now, and it's being caused by something that has not been talked about at all. So I come across a story, and one of the challenges now to move this many people around, and I will point out, this is a U.S. problem, but if it's a U.S. problem, it's a problem here as well, because a lot of flights from here will go through the U.S. You're going to have to leave somewhere else, as a transit point.
For sure.
And the problem is air traffic controllers. There is a large shortage, but that's only half the problem. The other half is, apparently in the U.S., the FAA has no plan to address this shortage. So John GRADEK, who we talk to from time to time, he's a lecturer at McGill's Global Aviation Leadership Program, to just discuss this and find out again what this will do and how it will impact perhaps Canadians who are traveling. John, thanks for being there.
My pleasure.
Let me start by asking the obvious question. These things don't happen in a vacuum. How did we get to this point?
Oh, I think we can go back to pandemic days, back in 2020, 21, when the airline industry was in a tank, and a bunch of agencies and organizations were laying people off. NAVCAN and the US FAA really reduced the number of controllers they had on staff because there was nothing left to control. So they retired a bunch of people, put some on furlough, canceled their classes that they were looking at training additional controllers. And then magically last summer, summer of 2022, demand started to show up. And it takes a good 2 years to basically get a traffic controller off the street and being able to do the job of being a controller. So we're in the middle of a catch-up phase on air traffic control, and it's going to be like this for another year.
Another year?
No.
Oh, that's great. I will point out, by the way, in this report, it says 77% of critical air traffic controller facilities are staffed below the FAA's threshold. 77%.
Yeah, and it's pretty significant if you look at what's going on, particularly in the Northeast and New York, Boston, Washington area. They're short about 500 controllers. The other one is probably around Jacksonville, where they're short about 300 controllers. So they're calling overtime to kind of fill in those roles, but at a certain point in time, these guys are burning out, and their sick days come in, and they just basically have to go into ground control and ground holds and all kinds of stuff to get the flights through that territory.
John, as soon as you say like burning out and them being incredibly tired and overworked, I'm thinking about safety issues. So what are some of the safety concerns that could come into play here?
Yeah, it's really high, it's high risk. It's a high risk. That's not a job that you want to take any chances on. I think air traffic controllers, and you've seen movies and you've seen stories about air traffic controllers. It is a very, very stressful role. It is probably one of the more important roles in aviation alongside pilots. But these guys and girls that are sitting as controllers, hats off. It's a job that you go in the morning and you are, on point for the whole 10 hours or 12 hours of your shift. And it's every minute has to be you have to be paying attention to the area that you're in. And unfortunately, we're seeing situations where even in areas where you're looking at ground control, we have aircraft hitting each other, scraping each other, tails and wingtips hitting. That's, to me, that's an indication that we somehow, some way need to improve the attention span of these controllers, because it's getting to be a little worrisome.
So I mentioned this is a U.S. problem, but obviously, as I said, a U.S. problem is everyone's problem because they handle so much air traffic. With respect to people flying, first of all, with respect to air traffic controllers here in Canada, are we experiencing a similar problem?
Yes, we are. We're not as bad. We're not as short as the U.S. is. We still are short. We still have occasional ground control issues and ground holds being issued by Canadian air traffic controllers because of congestion and because of lack of resources. I think Vancouver, Toronto, and even Montreal had some issues over the weekend, and it's affecting on-time performance of the airlines. The airlines are only around 50 or 55% on time through the weekend. And, that is not acceptable. And when you have airplanes that are full and their airplanes are stacked up, people are going to be missing connections, and it's not going to be a very pleasant experience this summer.
So you talked about how demanding the job is and the kind of training that goes into getting a position like this. I wonder, are there recruitment programs going on? What's being done to try and get more people to go into this field?
Oh, NAVCAN's on a fast track. I think they've got classes of about 200 people now. They're looking at, cranking up for another 600 between now and the end of the year. The problem, Natasha, is this, when you're bringing these people into class, you qualify them to get in there. You have psychological profiles and testing that's done. But even with that, half the class fails. Wow. And because of the stress and because of the fact that, you need somebody who understands and can visualize, the airspace around them, because you're looking at a screen that's two-dimensional, but, airplanes fly in 3 dimensions. So somebody has to basically translate that visual you see on a radar screen to 3-dimensional, and quite a few people can't do that. So that you have a significant number of people who are in class but probably will not make it.
What's interesting is I hear you say that. I think to myself, this seems like the perfect opportunity to involve AI. This is that kind of a business, right? And I'm sure that's probably what they're doing.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of research being done in terms of how do you bring in some decision support tools that will improve the way that these guys work. There's new technology being put in place into the radars and into the detection of, near collisions and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff, coming down the pipe that will make the job easier. But unfortunately, the job of controlling airspace is very much a human-based job.
I'm curious about one thing. For people, I know pilots make a reasonably decent living. What do air traffic controllers make? Do you have any idea?
They're not underpaid. they're well paid. They're well into the 6 figures. And with the overtime, they're pretty close to $160,000, $180,000 a year. But,
okay. So if anybody listening would like to be an air traffic controller, that's the kind of money you can make. Who knows? Yeah, we need some.
You got to be able to handle stress.
Okay.
This is not a stress-free job.
No, for sure.
It's not driving a cab. It's not driving a car. You're controlling thousands of people in the air, tens of airplanes. And, you've got a lot of people whose lives depend on the way that you do your job.
You're making it sound like I can't do that job, John, but that's fine. I have no problem with that. So.
You know what I'll tell you? I know one person who does it, John, and he is probably the most relaxed guy I know. So
you got to be relaxed. You can't take it to heart. Maybe Natasha, we can get you Natasha into a class and see how Natasha does.
It'd be fun to do one time.
I like that you think that I'd fare better than Aaron. Thank you for that, John. I appreciate it.
I'm much more laid back, John.
Have you seen Aaron drive? Ooh, good grief.
There's no driving involved in this.
Just with regards to how the summer is shaping up, though, in terms of travel, we're anticipating that it's going to be just as bad as last summer in terms of delays and luggage issues and yada yada.
Hope not. Like I said, I was cautiously optimistic a month ago. My cautious optimism is kind of waning just a little bit hearing about air traffic. But, the airports are staffed. The airlines have got, the staff that they need. Unfortunately, this is like a finely tuned orchestra. Everybody's got to play the same tune. And unfortunately, to make this thing work, air traffic seems to be lagging on this one.
John GRADEK, lecturer at McGill's Global Aviation Leadership Program. John, as always, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day.
All right. There you go. Seems like a pretty good job for someone who, would be the right kind of candidate.
Seems like I'd be better at it than
I don't think so.
According to John. He is an expert.
What does John know?